The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
The country of Palau will be leveraging Ripple's CBDC platform, and it's been a little over 2 weeks since a judge ruled that the sale of Ripple's XRP tokens on exchanges and through algorithms did not constitute investment contracts. Joining us now to discuss is Ripple's Vice President of Central Bank Engagements and CBDCs, James Wallace. James, nice to see you again.
Hey, Jen. Yeah, great to see you again. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, hello.
All right, we're going to discuss what's happening in Palau in just a moment, but we need to get your reaction on Ripple scoring a partial win here. How are you feeling about it? How's the rest of the company reacting?
I think we're all feeling great. We think it's a major victory for not just for Ripple, but also for the industry. We've been looking for clarity in the US for a long time. I think the real big takeaway is that, the judge has ruled that XRP in itself is not a security, and that is a huge breakthrough, a huge victory. So yeah, we're feeling great. Thank you.
But it doesn't seem like the story's over quite yet. So, I mean, like after you're done high-fiving Brad Garlinghouse in the hallways, what exactly is going on? Like, what's the battle plan? If you're going to be, maybe fighting this out for a while, as long as you have this 3-2 SEC involved, how do you approach? And since you're focused on CBDCs, how do you approach other central banks, knowing that you have this sort of conflict with one of the largest, with basically the largest economy in the world?
Yeah, well, a couple of thoughts on that, Lawrence. Firstly, I'm not going to comment on the ongoing strategy. We have, much bigger brains and the legal team working on that aspect. But I think one important factor here is that, going right back to the start of when the case was brought, that was almost exactly the same time that we started out on our CBDC projects, and it was kind of a strange time. So we just had this lawsuit. We also had COVID kicking in, and despite all those things, we were able to get this business off the ground. I would tell you that outside of the US, the SEC case, had almost no impact on our ability to get conversations and projects going with central banks. I know here in the US, we focus a lot on the US, that's what you'd expect. But the reality is that the rest of the world does not see things the same way. I think it's been clear for a while that countries like the UK and Switzerland and Japan have been very clear that XRP is not a security. So anyway, moving on to the CBDC side, it's not really been an impediment. Since we started 2.5 years ago on this project, We've announced 5 different countries that are working with us. We have a similar number that are not announced, and then we have 20 plus other active discussions underway. So from my point of view, it's great that we've got this victory. It doesn't dramatically change the work that I'm working on with central banks around the world.
That's interesting. So when you're talking to these different central banks around the world and working with regulators, the case hasn't really come up.
They always ask the question, and what's your point on it? And you say, well, this is a US specific situation, it hasn't impacted our business in other markets, and then they move on. I mean, I don't think we've had no countries say we don't want to talk to you because of it. So yeah, it's a bit of a red herring when it comes to other markets.
All right, let's turn to Palau. So the country consists of 340 islands, or actually more. It's in the Pacific Ocean and is running a trial of a stable coin linked to the US dollar. Talk to us about launching this program.
Yeah, thanks. So this is like one of my favorite things to talk about. So happy to be on talking about it. Palau is, as you mentioned, is in the Pacific. It's relatively small population dispersed across many islands. We started talking to Palau probably a couple of years ago. We were talking with the president about his sort of strategy for the economy, both domestically and internationally. And then this concept of a national currency came up. So to give you a bit of context, Palau is a independent republic. It uses the US dollar as its official currency. It has no central bank, right? So we started thinking through this. We thought, okay, well, we can do a US dollar stablecoin, which could be launched as a Palau branded currency, if you like. So these thoughts, matured over the following sort of 12 months or so, and then here we are, right? We're so happy to have got this project live with real transactions. There's a lot of things have developed over those months. We have the basic first use case is really a retail stable coin. So in this pilot, a number of government employees receive the PSC, the stable coin, and they're able to go and buy things in a select number of the large retailers in the country. And then the retailers can then redeem that back into fiat in their bank if they choose to do that.
So I have to ask you about their monetary policy, if you will, which is basically the U.S., right? It's run by the Fed, essentially. They don't control their interest rates, essentially. They don't control anything in their economy. And to be sure, it's a country of 18,000 people, which is about the size of a small town in the United States, a small city in the United States, definitely a town. But what happens here is, how is it going to be run? Is it fully backed stablecoin? Is it an algorithm? Is it suggested? Because you're dealing with the U.S., but you're not dealing with the U.S. And does it open the door for the Palau dollar, if you will, to become a sort of backdoor way to trade, to have a USD stablecoin without the regulation of the United States?
So I think regulation here is a very important topic, and throughout this process we've been working with the FIC in Palau along with the government. So this is ultimately the government sets the policies and the rules within Palau, and they do that in the context of the relationship with the US. So I think over time the use cases will probably grow around this stablecoin, but in a very controlled way, right? The intention here is to help improve the economy domestically, and then also help think about cross-border payments. But I don't see an environment where this is let out into the wild. It's a fully backed stablecoin, one-to-one held against US dollars held with the government. Very tightly controlled KYC process, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to set this up as a sort of poster child for a regulated stablecoin, that can exist. You get all the benefits of the stablecoin. I can't foresee a scenario where the Palau government will allow it to be used, to anyone that comes and use it for any use case. That would, destroy the value.
Yeah, but nonetheless, I mean, we have the U.S. coming out with regulation with stablecoins. It looks like they're probably going to be something that can only be issued, let's say, by U.S. banks. But here you are issuing basically a U.S.-backed stablecoin in a country that uses a U.S.-backed currency, i.e. the U.S. currency itself. What happens after the U.S. regulates stablecoins in the United States? What do you do on your end afterwards when you're dealing with Palau, an independent republic, but nonetheless tied to the U.S. dollar?
Yeah, I don't want to second guess what the regulations are going to be. Right? I think we'll obviously have to. The government, at the end of the day, is our client, right? We are providing the technology here, and just to give you a little bit more context on that, this platform that we launched recently, and Jen, I think we covered it a little bit on our discussion. Is a platform for issuing either CBDCs or stablecoins. You can issue either on a private ledger or on the public XRP ledger. And this is the platform that we've deployed in Palau and that we're deploying in other countries. At the end of the day, we are not the operator of that. We are the technology provider. Our clients, are the operators, and they obviously work on the regulatory and legal aspects of the currencies. We provide some thoughts on that, but at the end of the day, that's not our role in these projects.
I want to talk about Palau's Palau's very big cash economy. We played a video at the beginning of this segment. We saw cash being brought in on planes. Talk to me about setting up the infrastructure and changing sentiment. How are we going to get people to use the stablecoin there when everyone's used to using cash? I know it's a very different country, but in Nigeria, they're having the exact same problem with getting people to switch from cash to the CBDC.
Yeah, so I think it's an iterative process, and we're keeping an eye on all the other projects out there with with retail CBDC. I mean, just to give you an example, though, in Palau, the way it typically works, people get paid on a Friday, and then they literally line up round the street to get their cash out, right? Because the use of the cash, is what's accepted at all the stores. It's what they use to pay each other. So the design point on this stablecoin is, to alleviate that requirement. So whilst this first phase is, retail, so buying things at the store, obviously, P2P payments is going to be a big part of it. There's a culture in Palau of people lending friends and family money and then getting paid back. So there's potentially like a DeFi lending protocol that could be brought in there. So I think that the number of use cases, as we roll out, will be massive. And just basic things like sending money to someone that's on a different island, right? I mean, today you literally would need to get in a boat and go from A to B, versus with this new model, it's one click on your mobile phone. So it's a pretty compelling use case in Palau, which is very cash heavy. The last thing I'd say is offline payments, which is emerging as one of the top requirements globally for retail. Palau has not the best sort of infrastructure in terms of mobile networks, so offline payments is going to be a big part of the follow-on phase around allowing transactions to happen without a healthy internet connection always being available.
All right, James, we are going to have to leave it there. It's always a pleasure having you on the show.
Great to be on. Thank you.
That was Ripple's Vice President of Central Bank Engagements and CBDCs, James Wallace.